Example of inheritance in Java. I've got our Hello World program open and we've got our printer class up here. And let's go ahead and change this so that we're using some inheritance here. One thing about a printer is that it is basically a kind of machine. So we could envision that perhaps there's a base class that we could use that our printer would inherit from that's called machine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this isOn, this functionality or this state of isOn, and I'm going to move it up to the machine class that we're going to create, and we're going to make the printer inherit from that. So it's going to derive its isOn functionality from the machine class. So I'll go ahead inside our program, and then I'll add, under printing, I'm going to add a new class, and we're going to call this machine. And then this machine class, let's go ahead and move this isOn up to there. So we're going to take everything that has to do with isOn. I'm going to create this variable in our machine class. And then we'll create a constructor for our machine class that handles the isOn. And we'll take this setting of the isOn here out of the printer. So in the machine class, we'll do public machine, and then we'll have it take a boolean for isOn. Then we'll set this dot isOn equals to isOn. So now we have a machine class that has an isOn, and that's all we're really going to put in the machine class is this functionality. We're going to also add some methods. Let's add a public method called turnOn. And this will just be very simple here. All it's going to do is turn on the machine. So we'll just say isOn equals true, and we'll make another method called turnoff, and it will just set isOn equal to false. So now we have our machine base class. We've got our printer here, and it's trying to use this isOn that doesn't exist. So we need to inherit from the machine class. So I'm going to make printer extend machine. So now printer is basically inheriting in Java. This is how we do inheritance in Java, is we just use this extends keyword, and you can only extend one thing because we cannot inherit from multiple classes. So printer is going to extend machine. It is a subtype of machine. We've got a little bit of a problem here that it says implicit superconstructor machine is undefined, must explicitly invoke another constructor. So we actually have to call the constructor of machine since we made the machine constructor take a variable. So one nice thing about using Eclipse is we can just click here in the margin, and a lot of times you can just have this automatically be fixed for you. In this case we don't have that option, but what we can do is basically we're going to just call the constructor of machine and pass it in the isOn flag. So we're going to use super isOn, and what this will do is this will make sure that it calls the constructor of the machine class. Super just means call my parent or who I'm inheriting from, call that constructor, or use the attribute. It just refers, just like this refers to the current class that we're using, super refers to the parent, and we'll pass the isOn there. Now the other thing that you'll notice here is that we can't use this isOn because it's not visible to us. And that is because if we look in machine, we made isOn be private. What we can do is we can change this to protected. And what that will do is it'll allow any subclass, any children of machine, anyone who inherits from machine, to be able to access this variable as well. So now you can see in our printer class we can access the isOn. So let's go ahead and run this code just to make sure that what was working before is still working. You can see we had created our printer with it being set to on and a serial number or model number of my printer, and then we did this print colors. So I'll run this, make sure that this works. It still works. Let's go ahead and change this so that we're going to call print, and we'll do one copy. And now we should see that it is set to on, and the printer is set to on. And now what we can do here is, because we've used inheritance, because we have inherited from machine, we can call this turn on or turn off method. So we should be able to do myprinter.turnoff, and because it inherited from machine, it has this method, and turn off should turn the printer off. So now if we print one copy after turning it off, we can see now that it was on and then it turned off. So just to recap, what we did here is we created this machine class, and then this machine class, we put this is on. We moved it up from printer so that all machines could have this is on, because all machines have this in common. And then we created a turn on and turn off method that flips it from true to false. Then in our printer, because we had created this machine constructor that took the is on, we needed to actually call super from inside of our printer's constructor and pass on the is on, so that our machine class, our base class, could be properly constructed as well, because it requires this is on to be passed into its constructor. Then everything worked fine as long as we were able to access this is on from our subclasses, which we made our machine is on protected so that printer could access it. And then printer just worked as normal, but now what we've done is we've extracted out this concept of being on to a higher level, to a machine, and our printer has inherited from machine by extending machine. So now let's look at a basic example of composition in Java. So I went ahead and I created a new class for us called a paper tray. And we're going to use this because a printer usually has a paper tray. That's usually a part of a printer. So while a printer is a machine, a printer has a paper tray, and so we want to include a paper tray as part of our printer. So I've created a paper tray class, and this paper tray class is pretty simple. It just holds a number of pages, and you can add paper to it, number of pages to it. It keeps track of how many pages it has. You can use the page, and you can check if it's empty. So we're going to kind of simulate a real printer with this. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to create a private variable of type paper tray, and we'll call this paper tray, and this will be our paper tray. And we need to make sure that we either initialize it here when the printer is created or inside the constructor. I'll go ahead and just initialize it here so that as soon as this variable is created that it's initialized. We'll create a new paper tray, and then so now we have a paper tray. This is our composition. A printer now has a paper tray. Now let's go ahead and utilize this just to see how you would actually utilize composition in the real world here. So let's go ahead and make our print method depend on having some paper in the paper tray. So we'll change it so that when we do our print of printing copies, we'll go ahead and print the copies while our copies is greater than 0, like we had done before, and we'll put an AND condition here, and we'll say AND paper tray dot is empty, or and not paper tray is empty. So as long as the paper tray isn't empty, we'll continue to print our copies. And then let's go ahead and send a message if the paper tray is empty. Let's say if paper tray is empty, then we'll do a system.out.println load more paper. So let's go ahead and see how this would work here. So I'll go ahead and just leave our example here. In fact, let's just change this to try and print one page. So let's go ahead and run this. So we're going to try and print one page, and you can see it prints load more paper because we haven't actually loaded any paper into our printer. It's trying to use this paper tray, but there's no paper in it. So let's call myPrinter.load paper. But you can see we don't have a method on printer to load the paper. A printer should be able to load paper, so let's go ahead and create a method. We'll pretend like we already have one. And let's load, let's say, 3 pages here. And one thing that you can do in Eclipse is you can go ahead and write the method that you want first. I like to program this way so that it is a little bit easier to use your classes by trying to use them first. And then you can just go over here and create a method automatically. Eclipse will do this for you. So now it automatically created this method for loading paper. And I'm going to just change this so that it's count. And then what our load paper method is going to do is we're just going to call paper tray dot add paper, and we're just going to add whatever that count is. So we're going to use this class that we are using in composition, this paper tray that belongs to our printer. So let's go ahead and run this now and see what happens. Now you can see it did print my printer is on. And if we tried to print 3 pages, You can see it printed it 3 times. But if we try to print 4 pages, it's actually still letting us print 4 pages. So there's a problem here. We're not fully utilizing our paper tray. So let's go into Printer and see what's going on here. Every time we're printing, we need to make the pages in our paper tray be 1 less. So we'll go into paper tray and we will say use page. So we're using a page in the paper tray. So we're treating this paper tray as an object. We're letting it handle its own data. We're just saying we're using a page, which is kind of the benefit of composition here, is that instead of trying to manage all this state and manage all this stuff inside of our printer class, we're using a paper tray, a concept of a paper tray, and so we're encapsulating that data and that logic in the paper tray class. So let's go ahead and run this now and see what happens. Now you can see it's behaving as we expect. The page printed 3 times and it said load more paper. So that's the basic idea of composition, is just that you have another class and your class has an instance of that class. In this case, our printer has a paper tray. And I wanted to show you more of a real world example. So I'm actually showing you how to use a class that you might have through composition.